Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres-Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the podcast, guest co-host and New Hampshire Governor Christopher T. Sununu reflects on family and 4 terms in office. And later, Prevent Child Abuse America Chief Strategy Officer Jennifer Jones talks CAP Month and building a comprehensive ecosystem of primary prevention. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today on the show, we have a very special guest co-host, the 82nd Governor of the great state of New Hampshire, the Honorable Christopher T. Sununu. Governor Sununu, welcome to the podcast.
No one's ever gotten that right. So
Not twice in a row, at least. As you well know, it's Child Abuse Prevention Month, where we focus on making sure families have what they need when they need it, which is something we will talk about. But first, I wanted to pivot to you and your family, because I know that there's a lot on your horizon, having decided not to run for the governorship and in federal level. And so I wanted to know, what was that conversation like in your home?
Oh, boy. Yeah. You know, you ever look out into the ocean? The way you put that, I like it. You said there's a lot on the horizon, and there is, but it's just over the horizon. I can't see, like, the curvature of the earth is like, I got to stand on my tiptoes to see what's really over there. So first of all, I really have no idea what I'm going to do next. I'm totally focused on the job, right? It's a 24/7 job. But the interesting part of New Hampshire is I have to get elected every 2 years. So whether I want to keep doing this is a conversation that is kind of always in constant flux, obviously with the family, because if they're not behind it, if it's not working for them, it's not going to work, because it really is a 24/7 job, and It's a lot of sacrifice, not just on my part, but on their part. Because if I'm here or I'm busy or I'm called away on a crisis, I'm not with them, right? So that there has to be an understanding. Now, being governor is pretty great, because for the most part, when I'm in state, I get to come home and I see my kids. And for the most part, I have a rule. I say for the most part because I can't say it's probably 100%. But if I'm not traveling, my rule is either I'm up having breakfast with my kids or I'm home and having dinner with my kids.
So you actually have to park those time frames.
Schedule. It's all about schedule. And if you're disciplined on nothing else, be disciplined on your schedule and communicate that to your spouse. That's the other big thing. And that's hard, because sometimes people are like, oh, this last minute thing came in. Okay, well, am I going to call Valerie and let her know I'm coming home late, or is my scheduler going to do that? And so building a really good team that not just understands what your mission is and not just the politics and the policy that you're doing as governor, but building a really good team that understands what the family dynamics are, appreciates it, protects it. Yeah. That's what it's all about, protecting your time, the limited amount that you might have on their behalf. And if you do that, it can work.
So you actually have to enter this whole position by saying, look, here's my priority, here's my value. How can we work with this?
In terms of the family?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, there's no negotiating with your family, right? There's no negotiating there. You're negotiating with everybody else. Their family really does have to come first. But the family obviously has to understand it's going to come with the sacrifice. And then obviously, if I may, you add the sacrifice of just the societal pressure.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned 2 things that I think are fascinating. One of which is every negotiation I'm in with my 5-year-old, I'm losing. Just so you know, screen time, gone.
If you've entered negotiation, you're done.
There is, though, with my spouse, these are negotiations that I don't want to have to make because I'm doing it at the expense of family time. So I completely understand that. Now, when you decided, did you actually have that conversation where you just thought, hey, it's transition time?
So it's really weird because I thought I might do 2 terms and then move on. Yeah. I started considering a 3rd term, and the family was like, but I thought we were going to be done with this. Then COVID hit. And so then it's, no, we're in a crisis here. We are not turning back on this. We can't. That was a time I just wasn't going home for days sometimes. We were just in the emergency operations center. You saw me on TV all the time and all that. And I mean, we can talk about COVID a lot, but that's when it was like, no, we definitely have to do this. I was fairly leaning to running for a 3rd third term anyway. But once COVID hit, it was no question.
Yeah.
And it was the right thing to do because you need that continuity in such a drastic time with such unknowns and such new things that we were all going through.
Now, when you look back on your time as governor, what efforts, initiatives, legislation, what are you most proud of?
You know, I'm not great at everything by any means, but one thing I'm pretty proud of, I was able to surround myself with good people. Like it always comes back to people, right? And having good people is one thing. You can have the smartest people in the world, but if they're not cohesive, and I'm pretty good about laying out what's the mission, right? So the areas where we had to really rebuild and redefine the mission, things like mental health, specifically around kids, right? Mental health and families, access to those systems. For too long, the state was, well, we have a mental health system and it needs more. It's not working, so we'll just put more money into it. I have no problem putting more money into something, but it has to be a system that is designed to achieve the results for today's issues. And our system wasn't there. It was incredibly antiquated. Same with the opioid crisis. We took a completely different approach to the opioid crisis, specifically around kids, what we call a hub and spoke system. So instead of all the services in Manchester or Concord or in the Southern Tier, we made sure there's community access to services in your community, whether you're in Coos, Grafton, Cheshire County, wherever. And it costs more money to do that, but we got a lot better results. One of the amazing statistics I remind people of, 2014, 2015, 2016, the deaths were skyrocketing,
yes,
right?
They were.
And I think in 2017 or 2018, it peaked. We rebuilt the system, and ever since then, we've come down, which is great. Now, the rest of the country is up 60% in overdose deaths. And I try to remind other governors, our secret sauce was finding out that the addiction rates in rural New Hampshire were 4 times that of the inner city because they had no access. So those access points, those community and rural-driven access points with our new hub and spoke system, we call it the doorways, which for the most part has worked really, really well, and having what we call a closed loop system, which we're now integrating. So just because you move from one part of the state to the other part of the state doesn't mean you should lose services. Those types of things that we had the courage to rebuild are probably what I'm most proud of. And because at the end of the day, it got results. Now, I mean, you should never pat your back on the opioid crisis. We're going to have 400 plus people aren't going to be with us at the end of the year, probably. That's a lot, right? I remind people it's not just 400 individuals that have died from this. That's probably 400 families that have drained savings accounts trying to get treatment and recovery services and programs and options and interventions and all these other aspects that go into the other healthcare issues that come with that crisis. So that's a real crisis that compounds on each other. But you got to be mission driven. You got to have the management that says, okay, here's the metrics we're going to go after.
Yeah. I keep thinking about what you said with, that the fact that we won't have 400 individuals, right? And when I think about that, I think, we have to have the courage to learn from that. Now, in that time, of whom are you most proud?
Boy, that's a great question. I mean, obviously my wife. I mean, my wife hates politics. She's proud of what I do. But she stuck by me knowing that she really hates this world. There's a lot of hypocrisy. The one benefit about being governor is I hear everything. I don't care who you are and what you're saying about me, but I hear about all of it. The hard part is just having a thick skin and letting it roll off your back. But Valerie, so I have a thick skin. I can just deal with that. I just want good policy, good result. She's the mama bear. She's protective of her kids. She's going to be protective of her family. So I think for her to have to ask her, and she knows she just has to bite her tongue more often than not to a lot of the nonsense that we deal with. I mean, our government system is a good system, especially here in New Hampshire. It works and it's foundational and people can trust in it. And it's not just one party or another, and it's not just one policy or another. We really just try to get the best results.
Now, I'm certain that in your time, of course, there are things that you also wish you had gotten over the finish line. Are there certain things that, especially where families and caregivers are concerned, that we should be looking at?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I won't say it's like a specific policy or bill that didn't pass. I mean, a lot of things I'm a big believer in school choice, right? And we got that started. We got that door open specifically for low-income families that don't have that opportunity. Great, right? We rebuilt the opioid process and we bought the mental health hospital for children, and we're rebuilding all our mental health programs specifically for kids, and that's all going well. The key to all that, though, is workforce. Now, we're the only state in the Northeast growing in population, but that's still not enough, right? Because the demand is still exceeding the need. Now, we're much better off. I mean, I want all the states in New England to do well. I really do. Maine and Vermont and even Massachusetts having a very tough time with workforce. We're having a tough time with it. So whatever we can do to keep incentivizing a kind of a gold standard. And what I've learned is in the areas of most need, social work, mental health, the opioid recovery process, and treatment programs, those folks ain't doing it for the money, right? Mm-hmm. Teachers is another one, nurse. They're really not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the passion, the love of kids, and the love of opportunity that they're trying to open. So just becoming a real gold standard of care, quality metrics, that in itself can attract a lot of good workforce. But being very open to bringing the best providers, bringing the best workforce in is really, really important. So I'd say if there's anything being left on the horizon is scholarship programs for young individuals that want to get into these programs, debt repayment programs for people that stay in our workforce. I wish we gotten a little more of that done. I couldn't get some of that stuff through the legislature. And just I'm very pro-business. If the business and the economy are doing well, then that's how we collect taxes at the state level. But it's all feeding on workforce. And so I'd say if there's any long-term issue that, America has a long-term issue with it because we just have less kids. That next generation, right? They're having less kids later in life.
Right.
It's hard to find people. It's a generational issue, right? It's not no one individual's at fault, but that's our reality. And so anything we can do to incentivize that to keep us a little ahead of the crowd would be pretty great.
Yeah. Now I'm hearing you talk about all these different perspectives, all of these different things that, as an adult, we arrive at these perspectives based on everything that we've had to interface in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So now I know you have children. You have children that are now post high school, kind of pre-career.
Two of them, right?
Yeah,
I have a 19, 18-year-old.
And then you also have a younger one.
11. Yeah, Leo's 11. And how old are your kids?
5 and 8.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so I've got some time.
You're in the fun zone. You're in the 5 and 8 are fun ages.
They are fun.
Yeah,
They're wild.
You got a few more years. Of
Definitely
fun.
do. And I keep thinking about all the things we're talking about in that generation, preparing the generations to come. So I wanted to ask you this. How do you approach preparing these kids for all of the things that you mentioned, knowing that their environments, this is different than when I was young.
So different, right? So where do you grow up?
I grew up in Wisconsin.
Okay. Towards the lakeside though?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I will frame the answer with something my 19-year-old son taught me. So my 19-year-old, he got into some colleges and he got scholarship money and all that. He joined the Marines. And there's a motto in the military and in the Marines that when he came back from Parris Island just a couple months ago, he said, embrace the suck. Embrace the suck, right? There's a lot of suck out there, but embrace it. Don't fear it. And I do that as a parent. And what's the suck? Watching your kids fail, watching them have a tough time, providing right guidelines, right? Not pushing the failure by any means, of course, but understanding that the best thing you can do is set up a system where your kids are constantly failing better. And when we don't do that as parents right now, right? And by the way, it's not our kids. People say, oh, this generation of kids, they're soft and all that kind of stuff. That's our fault. That's our fault. We tend to want to spoil our kids and protect our kids and wrap them in bubble wrap and the whole 9 yards. And so the best thing you can do as a parent is embrace the toughest aspect. Because remember how resilient you were as a kid? I mean, we've all had tough times. But for the most part, we can be pretty resilient, both physically when we scrape our knee, but it's going to happen at some level. So let's embrace it in a way that teaches our kids how to deal with it, how to communicate and that's the other thing. It's hard on us, but the best thing I can instill in my kid is, tell me what's going on, man. I'm not going to I can't just wave a magic wand and fix all your problems. I find that if the kids feel comfortable at least communicating to you as a parent, telling you what's going on in their lives, holy cow, you've won the game right there. Because so many parents, there's no talking. And then that builds isolation and that builds negative habits with the kids and the whole thing spirals. So for me, it's watching my kids fail, hopefully, helping them learn from it. Every once in a while, it's okay to pick them up and help them dust themselves off, but get them right back out there and get them resilient on all the crazy things that can come with life.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because before we were talking about having the courage to learn something. Yeah. As a parent, though, having the courage to let them learn something, but then also giving them, I think, a pathway to success.
So as a parent, 5 and 8 years old, I always say you're still in the fun zone, right? So you're still kind of learning and experimenting. And as my 11-year-old is now, they're really in the mode of, hey, Dad, let's go do something, right? They look up to you and they want to talk to you and everything is fun and you're playing basketball 1 minute or video games or whatever it is. And then high school comes. And that's where, when we talk about learning, teaching them to fail, two things. The failure can be hard and the communication is even harder. They just don't want to communicate. And boys and girls is very different in that, right? I have a son and a daughter. And we've always been on very good communicating terms. And I'm blessed because Valerie is there too. A lot of single parents,
right?
It's all just on them. Or maybe there's a single parent that has one strategy and dad who lives in the town next door who has a relationship with the kids, but he has a different strategy.
Right.
All that can really come into play. But I find that it doesn't really exacerbate itself till around that 8th grade, right? 7th, 8th grade.
It's a transitional time.
Oh, it's so tough, right? So don't fear it, right? Do you find that you have friends like with high school age kids where you go
and they keep preparing us, but you're kind of always in the phase you're in. Like, I don't know any better other than these arguments I get in with a 5-year-old. And I will tell you, I feel like I'm winning them, but I certainly am not if that's the behavior is the case.
Yeah, feeling like if you feel like you're winning an argument with your kids, I would say something's wrong, right? Either you're going way too hard, you know, or they're winning and you just don't know it. You just don't realize it.
Well, I'm becoming more passive in the things that I thought I want because, it's less about
as
me.
a dad or as an individual?
And this is where it gets is that a slippery slope? Because I understand the empty nesting idea, I think does scare me because right now I have found more joy than caring about the success of something else than myself.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
So and all of a sudden I'm rediscovering the world is like, this isn't about me anymore. It's about kind of seeing them blossom. And I have no interest in their following my path. Like I was a football player, a basketball player. I did do music and things like that, baseball. I don't care for that for them. I want to see where they wind up naturally going. So I'm kind of rediscovering life, but I'm also seeing myself kind of become more fluid. Because I am more accepting now. I have no designs other than, look, they have to be good, respectable people. They have to know context. You know what I mean? I want them That's it, right?
That's the key. But as much as I try to stay connected with my kids and communicate and I, talk to their friends or think I understand what their social world is like, we have no idea what it's like. It is not 1997 anymore.
Right.
I mean, when we were in high school and ultimately me in college and it sounds like you as well. I mean, this was literally pre 9/11. Now that wasn't all that long ago. It was only 23 years ago, but the world has pre-pandemic, pre 9/11, pre social media, pre everything that we know today. So their world growing up is so different. I would argue it's the last 23 years, I'd say 25 years, let's say, from 1999 to 2024. America has changed greater in that 25 years than literally ever before with communication technology, politics, all of it, and not all for the better by any means. There's more opportunity in many ways, but there's also more angst and understanding what that really means in their day-to-day lives, all day in school, walking down the hall. That whole vibe that we carried in high school, so different now. I can't explain what it is, but I just know it's different. And I probably just have to appreciate that's not for me to understand, but, give them the flexibility and the tools, as you say, to fail well, have structure, be good people, care about others more than you care about yourself.
Well, Governor Sununu, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
This is fun.
And when we come back, Jennifer Jones of PCA America joins us. Don't go anywhere. Today's show was brought to you by Bank of New Hampshire. For 193 years, Bank of New Hampshire has put customers and communities first. With the expertise to help you realize your goals, their technology makes banking easier, and the friendly faces will make you want to visit in person. Want a bank that has your back? Bank of New Hampshire are your people. For more information, visit bnh.bank or call 1-800-832-0912. Member FDIC. Today's podcast was brought to you by Dartmouth Health Children's. As the only comprehensive pediatric healthcare system in the region, Dartmouth Health Children's promotes health, advances knowledge, and delivers the best patient and family-centered care for infants, children, and adolescents. Shared knowledge from expert providers across the system increases their ability to care for patients and families close to home. From annual checkups to specialized treatments, Dartmouth Health Children's is dedicated to ensuring all children live their happiest, healthiest lives. For more information, visit childrensdartmouthhealth.org. That's childrens.dartmouth-health.org. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Prevent Child Abuse America Chief Strategy Officer Jennifer Jones, who not only has served as a director of many child and family serving organizations and initiatives, but also hails from the territory of Wisconsin. Wisco, if you know it's good for you. Jennifer Jones, welcome to the podcast.
Nate, so great to be here. Thank you so much. I also just wanted to say, yes, of course, we have sort of this Wisconsin connection.
We have to be careful because this is going to quickly turn into me and you talking about best blood Bloody Marys and where to get them.
Exactly.
So truly, thank you for coming on. I know you and PCA America team are incredibly busy, given that it's Child Abuse Prevention Month, and that you've recently released, not to mention co-authored, a theory of change for primary prevention in the U.S. But before we get to that and the theory of change, help me understand what primary prevention is and why it's so important to us all.
Sure. So first, I just want to acknowledge there are a lot of really great and incredible activities being planned all over the country. I'm sure there in New Hampshire as well, really to bring awareness to the importance of child abuse and neglect and prevention in particular. And so at the national office, as you know, Nate, we're sponsoring Wear Blue Day on April 5th. We have Digital Advocacy Day on April 16th. And then new this year is this National Day of Giving, which we're doing on April 23rd in partnership with all of our state chapters. And then we're also co-hosting a bunch of local, well, I shouldn't say a bunch, but several local events in Chicago, which is where we're headquartered, as you know. So just wanted to call out all the great things that are happening for CAP Month. So I, as you know, Nate, and I just, want to acknowledge, you can Google primary prevention and actual definitions come up, right? There are certainly definitions that people look at and seek out around what primary prevention is. But what I like to say when I talk about or sort of explain primary prevention is this idea that we need to create the conditions for all kids and families and communities to thrive. And so what does that mean? It's about addressing the social determinants of health. So we know that that includes a number of things. It includes health, certainly health access, mental health. It also includes housing and transportation and poverty and systemic violence, right? And so we don't want to just prevent kids and families from coming to the attention of the child welfare system or prevent them from going into foster care. We actually want to reach families before they are in crisis. So we want to make sure they have what they need when they need it, and they can get it in the communities where they live. They can access it in the communities where they live. And so in essence, we want to ensure that all kids and families are living a purposeful and happy life with hope for the future, which is what our North Star is for our new theory of change.
I love what you're saying about this idea even of creation. The idea of creation to me suggests that there is a role for us to play in it, right? We're not passively sitting by saying, all right, if we are preventing something, we're actually creating more nurturing environments with hopes that we develop some sort of system where people thrive. So I wanted to ask this idea then, because a lot of the times we think about our families and from a bootstraps lens, like if you don't have these things, it's somehow reflective of the caregiver you are. So when we look at what environments can do, if we create them, why is that significant a perspective change for families?
I think that's a great question, Nate. And I think what our common narrative is in our country is that it's the individual behavior, right? And we even talk about that when we talk about ACEs, right? When we talk about adverse childhood experiences, it's my individual experiences and circumstances and situations. And rarely do we talk about the systems and the conditions that actually perpetuate individual ACEs. And so, Dr. Wendy Ellis did some great work, her team around the pair of ACEs, which really brought to light the fact that there are all these conditions, adverse community environments that exist for all of us. And so it compounds our individual ACEs. And so we need to go beyond. And I think our prevention field is getting there, but it's taken us a while. We need to go beyond thinking about just parenting classes or individualized interventions and programs. What are the systemic factors and the conditions that people live, work, play, and pray in every day that are contributing to whether you're well or not? And so this idea of, and I know we'll get there, but this idea of this ecosystem is really about how do we address those systemic conditions so that we're not just preventing those individual ACEs, right? We're not just preventing ACEs, but we're actually promoting health and wellness and happiness and positive childhood experiences and all the things that we know are critical to making sure that families are safe, kids are safe, and they have the financial stability and economic mobility that we all need and that we all know is really important to us being, creating safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments. So I think it's really, we need to go beyond the individual. It's important, right? We know that programs and services and interventions are critical and a component of this ecosystem, but we really need to start addressing those systemic issues if we really want to make true, meaningful, authentic change in our country.
Now, there certainly, though, has to be a nowness to this issue for you as an organization and as an individual to really write yourself into it with a theory of change. Why did it become necessary to envision primary prevention efforts as existing in that larger ecosystem so to support individuals and family?
Yeah. And so, as you know, Nate, and I obviously just mentioned this, but as part of our new theory of change, we call for building out a comprehensive and aligned primary prevention ecosystem in this country. We believe it does not exist. There are certainly components of it in certain places, as I'm sure there are in New Hampshire, there are here in Wisconsin, they exist in places, but they're not comprehensive and it's not aligned. And so we believe that in order to address these systemic conditions that we've been talking about, we need this comprehensive primary prevention ecosystem that includes a diverse array of actors working in this collective manner. We talked about this idea around collective responsibility with a shared sense of urgency. And so the research shows that all 7 of these levers must be present in this ecosystem if we're going to achieve our aspirational outcomes and ultimately our North Star. And so these include things like shifting mindsets, right? Having policies and practices in place that support positive and equitable childhoods for all kids. And then the idea, which we talked about, the idea of family supports and programs and services and interventions, right? It's those things like home visiting and family resource centers that are accessible. People can get them wherever they live. But if you notice, it's not just that. And I think that's where we spent a lot of our time the past 50 years of our work in the primary prevention field and really, building up these programs and interventions. But if we're going to see, again, this change that we all want to see in this country, especially for kids and families, we need to do things like shifting mindsets, right? We need to transform the narrative around prevention. If we do that, we're going to see change. We're going to see change in policies. We're going to see change in practices. We're going to see changes in environments. But it's critical that we have all 7 of these pieces as part of this ecosystem. I want to just call out too, Nate, you when we were talking at a meeting, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, you actually brought up this idea of an ecosystem when you said, and I'm going to quote it, I have it here, an ecosystem is typically described as healthy when the organisms living in it are diverse, many, and stable, and the system as a whole is able to withstand and adapt to shocks and changes over time. That resonates, right? I think that description of what we're trying to build really resonates. It resonated with us when you said it. I think it resonates with others in our field and our partners. But it's that idea that if we create this ecosystem that is healthy, that all of us are contributing to in a collective way, again, with this sense of urgency, that we can withstand anything that comes at us, right? And that includes environmental issues, that includes violence, that includes poverty, right? That this ecosystem is capable and prepared and has the tools and the resources that they need, that they can adapt to these shocks and changes over time. And that's what we need for kids and families in our country.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, and especially ended with this idea of kids and families, because throughout the framework, you go to great lengths to make sure you're placing families squarely in the center of really everything you're doing. Now, why is that fact, the centering of families, so critical to the success of all the ecosystem ecosystem work we're trying to do?
Yeah. So a little bit of context that I'd love to share here, because I think it's important, is so we used an adaptive strategy process to create the theory of change. We were very intentional about the process. As part of the process, we engaged nearly 1,700 people across the country over the 2 years that we were working on this. And that included parents and families, right? It was critical for us and really important to ensure that the process really raised up the voices of families. And so we talked to parents and families. We talked to our Healthy Families America sites. We talked to you and others in our state chapter network and our key partners. And again, it was so grounded in the importance and critical nature of ensuring voices of families and voices of our key partners, grounded in research, and we wanted it to be adaptive and flexible. Again, this idea of the ecosystem that we can adapt to things as they come at us. And so as we create this primary prevention ecosystem, we believe it's absolutely critical to center families in decision making. So we are building an ecosystem that is responsive and reacting to what we know families need, to what families are telling us they need in order to be healthy, happy, and well. You look at companies like Apple and Google, for example, right? They don't create anything without this end user in mind. They go out, and I've participated in a couple of these trials, right? Research projects where they're seeking input and feedback from the end user. We don't do that in our field. They do it every time they create something. So it's part of their culture, right? It's part of their narrative. And we need to make sure that not only are we seeking input and feedback, but that families are actively engaged in the co-creation and in the decision-making throughout the entire process, so that it's actually part of our organizational DNA. And that is going to create an ecosystem that will be successful, that will be responsive, and that will be adaptive to families' needs and wants.
That reminds me of a story a good friend who's an architect told me around human-centered design. He was saying, if you want to design a park that has a system of walkways through it, plant grass, and then 2 years later, pave over where the trails are. That's human-centered design, right? But he also said that's a nightmare for architects because they want to control behavior.
That's a great example. And it is, because we do this all the time in systems, right? We assume that we know what is best for families.
Right.
And when we, instead of saying, okay, you come into the child welfare system and we're going to give you parenting classes, instead of just automatically assuming that they need parenting classes, why not ask families what they need? And oftentimes we find, and this is based on the research and surveys and feedback, that what they need is financial support, right? They need stability. They need economic mobility. And so we should be responsive to that, and we should be creating interventions and programs that respond to that, as opposed to thinking we know what's best and we give folks what they do not need.
Yeah, you and I talk about this all the time. When you give families what they need, good things happen.
And we know this, Nate, that families know what they need, right? And they know best what they need. You know what's best for your family. I don't know what your family needs, and the same, right? And so engaging families and caregivers in the conversation, in the design of what it is we want to create, and especially this idea of an ecosystem, is absolutely essential to, and will show and prove whether or not we can be successful, if we're successful in co-creation and co-design.
Now, there's a lot of buzz around the theory of change here in New Hampshire, and I know in other states as well. So if I'm another organization or stakeholder, and I want to get involved, how should a family supporting agency approach understanding and even implementing a document like the theory of change?
Yeah. And so thank you for that question. We, as you know, Nate, because you were there, we announced our theory of change at our national conference. Melissa Merrick, our president and CEO, announced it in our opening address in Baltimore last August. We had a sold out crowd. There were over 1,200 people. It created a lot of buzz and excitement. And there continues to be great momentum around this work across the country. And so we're hearing things like for the first time, it finally feels like we have something that we can collectively embrace and we can all rally behind. And so it became pretty clear throughout our process, throughout the adaptive strategy process over the last 2 years, that the value of this theory of change is not just about PCA America, right? So when we embarked on this initially, we were creating a theory of change for Prevent Child Abuse America. And it became pretty clear early on that this is about a primary prevention framework for the entire country. Like our contribution to the field is this idea of an ecosystem, this idea that we can achieve these aspirational outcomes and this North Star if we all collectively unite and work towards it. And so we created this plug and play theory of change where anyone in our network or any one of our partners can insert their strategies and their values and beliefs, and it will all align. Their efforts will all align up to our shared work to build this comprehensive primary prevention ecosystem and obviously achieve the shared outcomes. We see this among the state chapters. How does New Hampshire's work or Colorado's work or Virginia's work or Oregon's work? What are the strategies that they need to employ in order to build this ecosystem? And so we have this plug and play theory of change, but we also have a number of tools and templates that we're building out to really help folks, our state chapters and others who are really interested in becoming part of this movement. People can go to our website. They can contact me. They could probably contact you, Nate, because you are doing some great work there in New Hampshire. So really anyone can participate in this, in helping to achieve our aspirational outcomes and our North Star.
Now, if listeners want to hear more about the work, what you do, where can they go?
So as I mentioned, Nate, anyone who is interested in our theory of change, they can download the full document on our website. It also includes the plug and play theory of change template, and we will continue to upload tools and templates. They can reach out to me and other staff of Prevent Child Abuse America. Certainly, as I mentioned, they can reach out to our state chapters as well. But I also want to just, call out, Nate, the incredible work that you all did in your 2024 resource guide for New Hampshire. I think you did an incredible job really talking about the ecosystem in the context of what it looks like in New Hampshire, how it's being implemented, what are things that, you all need to think about in your work. So folks can come to us, but more importantly, they can go to you and in particular, go to your resource guide, because there's some just incredible information and insight in there about how this work applies to the great work that you're doing in New Hampshire.
Well, I appreciate that. We certainly couldn't have done it without you, your hard work, your research, and your wonderful theory of change. Jennifer Jones, it's been incredible. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Nate, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your leadership and your thought partnership as we work to build this primary prevention ecosystem in our country. I think your contributions in particular in the communication space to our work and our field are just incredibly invaluable. And obviously, the New Hampshire Children's Trust are critical partners in helping to ensure the success of this theory of change and ultimately eliminating child abuse and neglect in this country, which is where we want to be. I will just end by saying I truly believe that this is our moment in history. I think it's our moment in our field where we can finally achieve the aspirational outcomes that we all have long desired for kids and families in our country. And so we're incredibly excited to be part of this journey, to be thought partners and colleagues in this work, to work closely with you and other state chapters and other key partners to make it happen.
This podcast was brought to you by Nixon Peabody, who delivers exceptional legal services for clients in the community by combining high performance, an entrepreneurial spirit, deep engagement, and an unwavering commitment to a culture of collaboration, diversity, and humanity. Nixon Peabody works with universities, hospitals, and nonprofits of every size to maximize impact. For more information, visit nixonpeabody.com. Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.